Hey guys, this is Nick and welcome to my Linux experiment. Some comments lately made me think about Linux and who its users are. Is Linux that hard? Am I biased for having used it too much and things that seem easy to me are actually out of reach of regular users? Here are a few thoughts. Linux still carries around a reputation of being complicated. It's often perceived as being a system for nerds who want to tinker with their computer and don't actually have any real work to do, or a server developer OS. All these preconceived notions fuse in an image of complexity and of Linux not being the right tool for a regular user. People often associate Linux with the command line, thinking that it doesn't have a graphical interface or that you need to do half the things with a terminal. These different issues can be explained quite simply, I think. First, the command line issue. While it is true that Linux has the most effective terminal, and that everything can be done without a graphical user interface, you don't need the terminal to use Linux. You can get by without it 100%. The problem here is that most tutorials and help guides resort to giving command lines to solve problems. I'm actually guilty of this as well. Instead of typing a long worded paragraph explaining where to click if you're using GNOME and different instructions if you're using Plasma, it's often much more simple to give a command line that will work for almost everyone. Users that look for help don't really know that though, so they go on thinking that the only way to solve issues is by using a terminal. In the end, it reinforces Linux's image of complexity. Now, as per having a GUI, Linux is actually the most graphic system there is, with so much choice to make your desktop look like anything you want. There are probably more options to configure KDE than there is on Windows, and if you prefer the macOS X way, GNOME, Elementary OS or Deepin can suit you perfectly. This much choice can seem daunting at first though. People who want to try Linux for the first time just want to use Linux. They don't know the concept of distribution, of desktop environment, of package manager, so they end up confused or downloading the coolest looking distro, which is often one that isn't as well supported or has more issues than others. Another misconception is that Linux will work just as Windows or macOS X. It is often billed as, it's like Windows but it's free and you can do anything. This is not a good way to onboard new users. They come in expecting things to work like they did on their previous OS, and they expect the programs they use to work as well. But once they're on their Linux desktop, there is a learning curve that can be quite steep or very low depending on which option they picked. The desktop doesn't work like they are used to. The options aren't the same. Even the names of these options are different between Windows, macOS or Linux. And the software? Well, if they find the staples like Firefox, Chrome, VLC, Spotify and others, it is quite easy for a newcomer to imagine that Microsoft Office, Photoshop and others will run just fine, which they don't. Switching to Linux often means switching to other programs as well. This seems obvious to us, but it's often ignored by users moving to Linux, and it is not something that is made very clear either. Linux has a lot of alternatives that are good enough for regular users or even prosumers. For professionals, switching workflows and tools might be too complex or downright impossible. Someone who browses the web and opens the terrible PowerPoint presentations Aunt May sends him every day will be at home, but someone who has painstakingly learned the ways of Photoshop, InDesign and Premiere will be forced to relearn everything. Now, Linux is also scary. It has to be installed. How many users have ever installed an OS? I'm willing to bet it's less than 50%. Windows and macOS come pre-installed. When they are completely broken, either you use their built-in tools to repair them, or you take them back to the store. Installing an OS is not an intuitive step. You can easily get confused by the terms here. Formatting, partitioning, mounting, using hard drive space. There is a fear of losing all data, of wrecking the whole computer. Even the simple act of creating a live USB key is not that easily accessible to users that are not that experienced. This process can go wrong, and once it has, Linux will be blamed for having destroyed the computer. So, in the end, is Linux's reputation totally undeserved? Not completely. All these steps and issues can be sidestepped and explained. The proof is in us, we made it. But should these steps and issues be explained more clearly, or should they even need an explanation? Saying to someone, just switch to Linux, it's like Windows but it's free and you can do everything you like with it, is a really wrong way to present things. Linux needs to be explained, carefully, and some fair warnings must be exposed as well. It is not the same as what you're used to. The programs will be different, installing apps will be different, Your way of getting help online, the interface won't be the same. You'll have to install it, so back up your data, etc, etc. This needs to be explained if we're ever to get rid of that Linux is too hard or Linux doesn't work reputation. Explaining things might make Linux look more tedious to use, but in the end, the users that will use it will be more prepared, will have a more successful experience, and will probably become advocates in turn. So these are my thoughts on the matter. What do you think? Let me know in the comments and let's talk about this. In the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye! If you enjoyed, please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. You can also follow me on Twitter at TheLinuxEXP. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye!